It's
What's going
December
on, brother?
12th, 2023. Got my coffee in hand. What's going on is I need to apologize to you. I was late. I don't know why I
Dude,
do
with
this.
two kids, the early morning, and it's pub 30 here in Eastern Europe, so I can't complain really at all. But not drinking a beer, but still, I could be. So don't worry at all. It's no skin off my back, my friend. Good to see you.
No, we do this. It's good to see you too. It's always a pleasure. But we do this every time. You're like, we need to do it early morning your time. I'm like, all right, 9 a.m. And without fail, I'm like stressed at 8:30 drop off for my son. Like, oh shit, I gotta get in. And we had peak traffic. And I inevitably have to text you 5 minutes before we're supposed to record. I'm running 10 minutes late, and here we are. 20 minutes after we're supposed to start.
Just allows me a few more minutes to perfect the charts for the people, and all is good. So hope the kids are good, and all is well for you this Christmas season.
Vibes are high. I mean, Bitcoin price is pumping.
Yeah.
It's been a couple years of some pretty like hang in there, guys. Bitcoin's base money. It's climbing the charts. It's falling down a little bit. And I know Q3 ended what? End of September. So none of what has happened over the last 2 months will be reflected in the data we're about to discuss. But
No,
we'll
no,
look at,
I always keep the exchange rates moving on, even though the
yes.
data is as like the fiat money supply data ends in September, as I always have to reiterate because these banks are like so slow to publish the data. I do, extend them out and just adjust the currency rates, and all the Bitcoin data is current. So it'll be all right.
Yeah, let's get bullish. Let's look at these charts. What are the power trends looking like these days?
All right. The good old power trend line we got right here. Actually, that's wrong.
It's a daily
Logan,
active.
do I need to switch? It's only on that tab, maybe. It's not on the whole window. Hold on.
I
Let me
thought
go
you
back.
guys troubleshot this before I
I
got
thought
in here. What's
I thought we
going
did
on? You were
too.
just talking a big game.
Whole window. Hold on, Logan. It's coming back. There we go. It was only a tab I had with you. There we go. Good enough. A little bit of my browser peeking through there, so it's not perfect, but it's good enough. Okay. So this is the best trend line to look at. No need for anything else. I'll show you how the trend lines have evolved over the years, but not linear, not exponential, not logarithmic, but the power curve. That's how this works. Kind of a cross between logarithmic and exponential, but this grows fast at the beginning, but then kind of smooths off more at the end. So remember, we're really bumping down on the 2 sigma down move a year ago, which is an extremely rare event. That's what these bands represent. And here we got, as of December 10th, which is basically the same price as today, $43,000, $44,000 Bitcoin. We're still close to 20 grand under the trend line. And remember, this trend line is a 95% R squared. All that means is that the volatility or the variation of the price around the trend line is 95% better than if you just drew the average, a straight line. That's all that it means. So it means it's a very, very good regression. Goodness of fit is very good. And we're still 18, 17, little less than 20 grand under the trend. Fell under it last summer, June, 2 summers ago, June 2022, with all the madness, all the chicanery that was happening in the space, solidified by the FTX hilarious zero Bitcoin upon bankruptcy fail. And then now we're back up. So I did a video of this recently, and people always want to know, they don't want to know the past, they want to know the future. So let's just run right to it. Remember, the blue bands are 2/3 of the time you can expect the price to be within there. And that's just mathematically. I'm not making up numbers. That's just mathematically how it works. Red bands are 95% of the time based upon the trend. So if you go to the halving, say April, May, trend is at 70 grand. 1 sigma down would be 36 grand. 1 sigma up only 159, 160
Whoa.
grand. 2 sigma up would be 472 grand. 2 sigma down, 28 grand. So it's a big delta there. 400,000 dollars worth of range that Bitcoin still trades in. But, that's how it looks. And then you go out, if you assume the 4-year cycle, let's go out to December 2025 would be the 4-year cycle. The trend line's at 130,000. And you see there, let's just go on the upwards. You can get 1 sigma up would be 287,000, 2 sigma up, $849,000 for Bitcoin. Take it out to 2030, $600,000 trend line. Actually, this has come down a little bit, probably since we last talked a quarter ago. It used to be about $600,000 by 2030. Now it's 580,000. So that shows you all this does. It's nothing fancy. It's not stock to flow or anything. It's nothing fixed, nothing made up. It's just like while the price is below the trend will go down. And then once the price gets back up, the trend will move up. So it has been pulling it down for a year and a half. And you can see that, in 2021, the double top there, we actually did not have, unlike prior cycles, we did not get up to the 2 sigma move. We could talk about all the reasons maybe that is why, but we did do that in 2017. We did in 2013 and even in 2011 with those spikes. So that's how it looks.
So zoom in again to like this year.
Yep.
So what you're saying is, everybody over the last couple of months is like, whoa, pumped to 44K, currently sitting where around 41. I don't even know.
I think, no, we're at 44 even. Yeah, 40.
41.4.
41. I'm sorry, 41.4. Correct.
Luckily, we have our trusty block clock mini right here with the price.
There you go.
41.466. Well, people are saying this is like a big pump. Going to pull back, going back to 30, 35. But if we look at the power trends, we're still below the average.
Yep, below the trend, and even a 1 sigma down move, which again just means like you're outside of 2/3 of the time of the observations, you'd have to get down to 30,000 for that. So plenty of space in between there for, and everyone likes to say in the mainstream space, Bitcoin is volatile. Yeah, but look at how it's followed around this trend over the last 15 years. And it does have a big range, but it's still, the trend line is 95% R squared. So there is some interesting reliability there. And again, no one knows the future. Hyper Bitcoinization could happen. This thing could be destroyed, this trend line. Bitcoin could go to zero, which obviously none of us believe that on this show. The trend line would be destroyed, but it hasn't been destroyed over 13 years of pricing data. I started this in 2011, Bitcoin Pizza Day, or 2010, sorry. So that is what it is.
How are you marketing this?
I was talking with Peter McCormick and Danny on one of their shows, and they're like, yeah, you got to get this on your website. And I do. I'm mostly just doing YouTube videos on this, but people would have fun to play around with these curves.
Oh, they would. Well, and when I say market, I mean position it. You should position this of like, here is the chart that will allow you to zone out all the noise. Just look at where the price is in relation to the power trend line and standard deviations above or below it.
Yeah.
Just have some confidence.
Yep, exactly. And I think that's you can't put every chart up that I'm doing like with research and stuff, but this one is good enough. I think that people just like it so much. They'd love to see those standard deviations. So yes, I can say it's in the works. May take a little bit, but it'll be up. Let's say next year for sure. Hopefully early next year. Let's just do another one really quickly. Same trend line, but I'll show you the evolution. Remember the evolution? So the old 2010 trend line, this was like, we've fallen off this trend line, unfortunately. If we were on the 2010 trend line, we'd be at $128 billion Bitcoin by 2030. And even today, $1.8 billion Bitcoin today. You're not misreading that, per Bitcoin. That's the trend of how fast it went up in 2010. This would have been nice. This is a Slashdot article. You can see just it bounces quickly there in 2010. But won't run through every year here. But again, this is another interesting thing about this trend line is from 2016 And 2016 was the lowest. I'll show you how that has progressed, but I'll take off the 2010 just to maybe
Well,
move a little bit of the noise
can you
away.
put 2010 back up?
Okay.
Maybe this could be learning. Like, what were some of the factors that could have driven this trend line to be so extreme? Was it just the infancy of the exchange infrastructure, where price discovery just simply wasn't easy because the exchange infrastructure was so nascent?
I think I think that. I think the fact that anytime if you're in a strong compounding exponential logarithmic type growth situation and you start with a base that's basically zero, it will definitely grow fast, and that's what happened. But no one can predict exactly how it's going to go. But it just so happened that with Bitcoin over the years from 2010, 2011, 2012, 2010 was just the fastest. So where you have here, for example, our friend Laszlo, this is like 0.1 cents, 10,000 Bitcoins, so 10,000 Bitcoins for two pizzas, right? It's like $40 was the transaction, something like that. And it was actually done with British pounds, which was interesting. But you can see it was just like humming along at this price. It was like a penny. Then the Slashdot article comes out. A lot of developers get into it, and it goes to 10 cents, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 cents, over the summer. And then by December, it's up to like 30 cents. And then by June of the next year, it's up to $30. So that's, when you start from nothing and then you climb that fast, like even, day traders just love that with stocks. Like that's where you can certainly make a lot of cash. But we just didn't continue on with that growth, whether it be just the adoption of wallets, miners, infrastructure, like you said. Everything was just slower than what it was in 2010. When from zero to like $30, and then from 2011, people remember how this price curve works, right? 2011 goes down, to a couple dollars here by the end of 2011 from June, and then it takes 2 years to get back over to $1,000 for the first time. So that's just how it looked. And I don't have, because I didn't want to clog the chart, all the other trend lines, but just imagine that from 2010 down to today, it's moving down. Like the curve is just moving down as we see that this is just kind of how the pricing action has shaken out. So all those factors and hundreds more, we just did not have the adoption rate that happened in 2010. Could probably be more scientific to explain other things like that, but that's just how it looked. So statistically, this is where we've settled today after 13 more years of pricing data. So just quickly with this that I think is interesting is you might say, okay, well, this black line, which you're showing is the all-time line, right? 95% R squared. That's cool. All right. But 2010 was so crazy. How are we going to know what it's going to be 10 years from now? Well, this is where I think it gets interesting. Yes, Bitcoin is super nascent, as you said, still. And though we have tons of adoption, we even get the old regulators getting in the game now more than ever. I mean, just more eyeballs on Bitcoin than has ever been every year. Still, how can you say that like 10 years from now, that curve won't be like much lower? And yeah, it's true. It's possible. But we have some interesting data to show that might not happen if you look back. So I'll just take off the 2010 curve. Here's the all-time. All right, this is like, you can see the curve runs nicely through the logarithmic scale and the power curve. So let's zoom in just to see it. This past couple years. Let's go from 2016. All right, so just watch closely. I'll pull them up. All right, so 2016, it's a red line. You can barely see it. 2017 is a blue line. 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. So the fact that all of these trend lines each year, no matter where you measure it, compress around the all-time line, I think is pretty interesting. Certainly other assets do this. I'll show you one more after this. But for Bitcoin, this supposedly volatile asset, right? Since 2016, it's had basically the same line. And let's zoom in so you can see like exactly. Remember, they're all around. Like some are higher, some are lower. 2018. I had 2016 in red because it was the previous low. we have actually, if you can see this, the black line is now the lowest. So because of all the chaos of basically last year and the deep bear from last year, Bitcoin being 15 grand a year ago, that has pulled it down to as low as it's ever been. But that's not always the case, is the point. Like, another bull could easily pull it back, where 2016 and let's look at the low ones. 2020 is a low one. 2016, 2020, 2017 is also another low one. So those could, again, take a place as a lower trend line. You know what I'm saying? As the price continues, we get into a bull, and then the trend line pulls it back up. So it's just basic statistics, nothing fancy there. But I just measure it every year just to show you that we actually do have some interesting data to show that, all right, after a mega bull in 2021 and a mega bear in 2022 into 2023, it is the lowest it's ever been, but it's not that much lower. All right. And to show you that now, let's look at this one. Here's Apple. I'll be quick about this. So we have a lot more data with Apple, big tech company, major adoption, huge company, right? Exponential stocks, pretty much all stocks, if they're like long-term, doesn't really matter what kind of stock they are, growth or speculative or whatever, they're going to fall into an exponential curve. Unlike Bitcoin, which has this power, this faster adoption, stocks are just exponential. And exponential, all you have to know is that it's a straight line on log scale. So you see, this is an exponential curve. It's a little bit different, but you can see that it hugs the Apple price. Now, Apple went through a lot of stuff. We don't go through the whole history of Apple here, but in the 90s, they were struggling, and then Jobs came back, and the iPod and all that stuff, they increased. But now let's just look at the decade by decade for Apple. So here are the 80s. It's above it. Here are the 90s.
Oh.
Here's 2009, pulling it back up. Here's the 2010s, pulling it back up further to where it is today, the black line. So the 80s are actually the closest to today as far as the angle of it. But you can see that huge trough in the 90s pulled it down. Again, I'm not saying it's not going to happen to Bitcoin. No one knows. But, you can be pretty wild on how these trend lines go. That's the point of this. You can be pretty sporadic with huge deltas in the ranges. And where Bitcoin's is just not like that. They're all stacking from 2016. Each trend line each year is pretty much stacking on top of the next. So that's my latest.
Yeah, it looks looks much more mechanical and predictable in Bitcoin than Apple.
Yeah. And again, 2 decades out, maybe it will be lower still. Maybe we'll have hyper Bitcoinization, and this thing is blown out. Because hyper Bitcoinization would blow this out too. You would have probably, but if it's like a steady growth, which we've been having here, then this is how it will look. So 600K by the end of the decade.
What's the probability you put on hyper Bitcoinization in the next 7 years? 6 years now.
I'd say lower. I don't know if it's a low, but lower. You might have a different view.
I don't know. I just try to stay humble and stack sats.
Agreed.
It's
you never know, man. We can get into that a little bit later.
Yeah.
With just all the shit that keeps coming down on us. It's unbelievable. We don't have to go too much on the charts anymore, but it's the top 5, the old base money here. This is what I said. This does stop in September. Quick aside, a couple central banks, they always take time to publish, or some still haven't published since their economies have been on fire. One notable is Iran. I haven't even gotten on their central bank website since June of 2022, when they had a lot of riots and protests and literally fires. So I think that's interesting. If any listener out there, via your VPN or not, can actually connect with the Bank of Iran's website, I'd be interested. Let me know. I've asked other people, they haven't been able to get on. So that's kind of interesting. Like, it's the central bank's literally just closed to the world. You can't connect. Even with Iranian VPNs, tried to connect. I haven't, let's unless anyone from the NSA is listening. But so that is an interesting central bank that's kind of off the grid now, like fully. And then another one is, interestingly, Argentina. That's a story I want to talk to you about.
I want to talk about Argentina too. I've got some questions.
Yeah, we can go there in a sec. But since July, basically, they haven't updated their numbers, and it's been very spotty. Sometimes I can't even connect. You do connect sometimes, but like they're not updating, at least as of the last couple weeks from July. So that's interesting.
I mean, and this is like a qualitative sign that the money's breaking in these countries. If you can't even,
I would absolutely say a qualitative sign and a real sign. Like I track this stuff. These are top 50 currencies in the world. I'm going through. I'm actually seeing, what central banks will connect to you or not, or show up their webpage, update their numbers. If you can't even update your numbers, and obviously we know why with Argentina. There's big changes there, which are very interesting, and I hope very good. But that's just a little aside. I didn't mention that in my little update, but Iran and Argentina are the latest that aren't updating. So just a quick one here. We see that it's down from the COVID top. It was about 30 trillion in the base money. Probably when you and I started doing this, Marty, I started doing this in 2018. Okay, so it was like 20 trillion. I don't know when we started doing our little updates, but it was probably somewhere here. It was pre-COVID. So still 20, it was 20 trillion, right? We're down to 26 trillion total, dollar equivalent. But that's still September 2020 levels during the midst of COVID. And how much more they're going to be able to cut that off with these rising interest rates, I highly doubt.
And do you have any comments on reverse repo draining? People are saying that's sort of quiet QE.
Yeah, I haven't checked on the facility in a bit, but they have been easing up on that, I guess. It was, I'll check it right now.
It was 2.1 trillion at one point. I think it's like 800 billion or something now.
Yeah. So, that could be hard for, so reverse repos and repos is basically just non-banks having access to the Fed's liquidity. If they want to trade with the Fed other than the market, it's theoretically taking liquidity away from the system, even though they themselves are getting the liquidity from the Fed, but they're not dealing with anybody else in the market. So the fact that they're not doing that as much anymore, theoretically, is better for the market, and it's how they're trying to unwind all of this just massive inflation that they've put into the system before. So theoretically, is better that the market is now dealing with each other and not just with the Fed, because it's a big issue, I think, to have the Fed just keep on taking more and more liabilities from other market participants, right? Like they already have monopolized the banking system. They need to monopolize the shadow bank system as well, because that's what the reverse repo and the repo facilities happen with the Fed. So I'm not surprised that they're trying to make it come down, but it's just one more thing why they distort the market, and they're trying to normalize it, and it is becoming more normalized. How much more that can go on, nobody knows. Especially with these interest rates, I would say, because these interest rates are tough on a lot of people.
Yeah,
and everybody always talks about you need that credit, baby. So, we know the story from there.
Yeah. But back to the Q3 update. I was looking at the price here. Bitcoin was around 28,000 September 30th, I believe.
Yeah, but when I published it, I'll show you this one. So this is I published it at about 43,000.
Okay.
So it had passed silver again, Switzerland, and India. India was kind of border line last quarter. So back up again above those mid majors, let's say, and the last one ahead of it now again is the sterling. So it just shows you how open this territory really is. Like all of these fiat monopolized regulated currencies that everybody says they need to strengthen their economy and all these things, monetary elasticity. Bitcoin's bigger than all of them. This is it's probably the main picture. If you take anything away from this, is like just look at the snapshot of each central bank's, what you see in these green bars and plus gold and silver. This is central bank monetary liquidity that they pump into the system, the base of the system. And that's why Bitcoin UTXOs are the base of the Bitcoin system. So that's the accurate comparison. That's why I've done this now for 5 years. And this is the chart. So when you're between, 30 grand and 60 grand, it's like we're in the mid-major area, right? And silver is in that as well. That's this $35,000 Bitcoin price or $700 billion worth of silver. That's the estimated non-industrial silver in the world. And silver works kind of weird. As we know, it's like more industrial than gold. So you probably double that to get the total silver that's ever been mined. But half of that is just constantly churning through the system. So the industrial system, conductors and conduits and iPads and iPhones and electronics and all the rest. So that's not included in here. That's why it's a monetary type silver. And then gold, of course, is always number one. 11 trillion at the moment. Also non-industrial gold, although gold's industrial usage is way less than silver's, maybe 10 to 15%. It is 10 to 15%. It's $588,000 Bitcoin to reach gold.
Yeah.
But the big four, dollar, euro, yuan, and yen. Dollar's back on top, which hasn't been it's been a long time actually since the dollar's base has been higher. It's behind the euro now. Or it was always behind the euro, but now it's ahead of it. 250 to almost $300,000 Bitcoin is all it would take. Think about the power percentiles again and those bands. It's all it would take to get past the balance sheet of just one of those central banks.
Yeah. Going back to the dollar surpassing the euro. The European Central Bank hasn't had as aggressive a monetary policy as interest rate policy specifically.
They have had some. Yeah.
It hasn't been as drastic though, right?
No. I guess relatively it has because the dollar is ahead of it. Oh, but also I should say this. This is the other thing. I know why it's the main thing is that the dollar itself is strengthening. So here we can see this. This is the growth rate trailing 12 months. So again, the all-time is roughly 13%. Remember, it's about 1% a month. 1% a month compounded is close to 13%, not 12%. So your money inflates, literally the stock of it. The world average, the world weighted average, 1% a month. Doesn't matter where you are, right? The weighted average of the world. And then you can see how that the dotted line is the sort of the volatility of that 13%. So sometimes it's way up, as it was in COVID days, 35%. Global financial crisis, 36%. You see the annualized run rate there, trailing 12-month run rates. Now, we've been about flat for the past couple quarters. But here's the interesting thing. If this percentage right here is telling you that it's flat, a little bit negative, but mostly past couple months flat, 0%, negative 0.1%, how could it be that the green value is going down if the percentage is negative? The reason, which is interesting, is that the dollar is strengthening. This is that Wittgenstein's ruler type of thing. Like I can't, due to the inherent nature of we don't have a beautiful system like Bitcoin with fiat currency. We have all these different fiat currencies. The only way I can sort of visualize it for you is to put it into sort of the leading currency, which is the dollar. But that is money is not a measuring stick. Remember Ludwig von Mises, money is not a measuring stick, actually. And you can only compare it one-to-one with whatever good you're looking at, whatever good you're trying to engage in. When you're trying to look at it all together, it certainly helps to see the money supply. But, it's going to look different if you look at this chart in yen or whatever. But if you look at it in dollar terms, all of the currencies, you see that the other currencies, euro included, are falling in value. So that's why the chart is falling down, even though since they've hiked interest rates so much. And a lot of that you do see here, right, from 2020, the huge hiking of interest rates. Again, we talked about this many times. That's pulling money out of the system, pulling those bank reserves out of the system. It has gone down. But for the past year, it's basically been flat, yet it still goes down because the dollar continues to hold against these other currencies, which is another interesting sign. I mean,
And
dollar just gets stronger and these other currencies keep getting more
particularly against the euro, dollar getting stronger because people are looking at the energy policy in Europe and the potential for economic growth and saying there's nothing here. So why hold euros?
There's also a lot of horrible fiscal situations in Europe. There's also a horrible security situation in Europe, which, I like to go on about. So there's a lot of problems structurally with Europe. And I feel actually, as an American European, I can tell you, I have confidence in the States. I know you have your issues, Marty. We'll get there. But I do continue to have confidence in Americans.
I do too. I don't have confidence in Europe. I have confidence in Americans. We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And for anybody at home that can't see this chart, this data goes all the way back to 1969. And so this compound annual growth rate is essentially 13% on average over the last 5+ decades, which is a very long time scale.
Very long time scale. It's the modern era, basically the end of the gold standard, like any sort of semblance of the gold standard, and it's weighted. It's a weighted average. So there are some currencies, right? I have 50 currencies, right? But I don't have data for some of them all the way back. But that doesn't matter because I just don't factor them into the basket at this time. So there's nothing like skewed here. It's just here, at the very beginning in the 70s, you maybe only have something like 20 currencies, right? But as you just add more and more, they change the basket. But
adjust the weightings appropriately and the data makes sense.
Yeah. So that's that. You want to talk about fees?
Hot topic. Probably should talk about it. Bullish.
Just want to show you. Just want to show. No comment. But here's the daily fees. I know we do sats per byte or sats per V byte, but this is just simple dollar per transaction per day average. So 2017, huge, $60, well over 60. I can't even catch it. 2017, $70, like per one day. 2021 got up to $60. Our ordinal scare in the spring, in May, $30. Here it hasn't been as high, but it's definitely been, let's say, more prolonged in the higher peaks. This is where we are, coming down from another peak just a couple days ago. This is only as of December 10th, so a couple days before today. But yeah, you definitely can see it's, some of these peaks are higher than the April, May sort of kerfuffle about this. But then just the last thing about this chart, again, I always try to just look big picture, look long term. If you look at I know there have been blocks where fees have been like basically 100%. I mean, not 100%, but the vast majority of the block reward. That's the Coinbase versus the fees. The vast majority is fees. But still, if you want to look at this more gradually, look at it over a trailing 12-month range. All right, so just what miners make, just roll 365 days of miner splits, their fees and their Coinbase transaction. The worst it's ever been, in 2018 was 86% Coinbase, 14% fees. So a little bit better in 2021, 90%. Here, we're at 95%. So definitely, again, this is a slow moving average. I mean, it's a slow, it's a 365-day figure. It probably will go down, test the 90% levels, maybe even 85, depending on how long this goes, obviously. But it's, this gets into the philosophy. We can take this as deep as you want. I don't have strong opinions, but it's not the end of the world. I'll say that, and we've definitely seen this before twice. I'll say that.
Block space is scarce. If Bitcoin's going to be as successful as we think it can be, I think this fee pressure should be expected. You should prepare accordingly. Another interesting thing here, I pulled up insights.brains.com. I just think this is fascinating, where the price of Bitcoin in December of 2021 was, let's just say, anywhere between 50 and 65K, depending on the day. And yet, as it stands today, we're making around the same daily mining revenue in US dollar terms. So miners are pulling in the same amount of revenue as they were in the middle of December 2021. Prices half, or well below. It's actually not half.
Not half, but yeah.
Well below. And so that fee, the fee bump in the end of December 2021, fees came down a bit. It says fee bump, even though we're below where we were in price in December of 2021. The daily revenue is about the same. That's another thing. Yes, the daily revenue is the same, but obviously a ton of hash rate has come on the network between December 2021 and today. And so the average revenue per miner probably isn't the same as the aggregate of all miners, and a lot of miners have joined the network over the last 2 years. So it's fascinating. Then if you go to that hash price, let's see where the hash price is. Go on a 5-year. Let's take hash value off. Yeah, we're like around 9 cents. Then if you go back to December 21, we were at like 24 cents.
Right.
So that's
an interesting one.
This highlights like the relative revenue per miner.
Yep. State of the industry, state of the equipment, pools, all that stuff. It's interesting to see such a lower hash price right there. Yeah. I mean, there's so many ways to slice and dice it, and obviously people get caught up in a lot of different messages, Bitcoin for everybody and Bitcoin solving all the world's problems. And I'm not trying to gloss over, there are issues that need to be solved there, but what you see with this chart here that I've shown is kind of it's an accountant's way of looking at it, or a financial analyst's way of looking at it, right? It's just a trailing 12-month realizations of revenue. And just think about all the times. I mean, think about the whole, the SegWit debate, right? How contentious that was. And at the very worst, on a trailing 12-month basis, it was 14%. 14% of the block reward on a trailing 12-month basis was fees. And I got to 10, and now it's 5. Probably will go more than that now, but like you said, it's to be expected. It should be expected, and I know you've been talking about that a lot more than the deep dives I do anyway, but it's just one way of looking at it.
Yeah. Yeah, the mining, we're heading into a whole new era of mining. Era, not error. Bhutan come out early this year. They're mining. They're doubling down. Oman did a $1.1 billion investment in a private miner in Oman. Obviously, Russia, if you talk to the ASIC manufacturers, they're pretty open about the fact that the Russians are buying their machines at a premium. They're happy to send them that way. Yeah. Venezuela's been mining for some time. Obviously, we have the private industry here in the United States becoming pretty sophisticated. I think it's going to be a fool's errand to try to use historical mining data and mining trends to project what's going to happen in the future. The nation states have officially entered the game. May not be the largest, but it is the snowflake on the snowball. That'll continue to accelerate.
What do you think? We talked about this on my pod a while back. Like, what do you think about the fact that it's over 50% now of KYC'd mining pool hash? What do you think about that?
Not great. I've been pretty open about this. I think what you want to do if you're trying to dissect, diagnose the state of the network. You want to find the weakest link. I think mining pools are the weakest link from a security perspective or a censorship resistant perspective, to be more specific, than maybe hardened. It's good to see pools like Demand and Ocean Pool coming to the market, regardless of whether or not you agree with particular decisions that any of them made. I think separate from the fact that more competition is coming, people understand that this problem exists at the mining pool layer and are trying to provide solutions and options to the market, which is good. So I do think there is a bit of self-correcting going on in the market right now. There's other people teasing that they're going to be launching new pools soon to help solve this problem. But yeah, as it stands today, Effective Foundry, F2 pool, and pool make up a majority of the hash rate is not ideal, especially when you have F2 pool coming out and openly saying they're going to censor. Of course, they backed away from that, but it's just a tremor that could lead to a larger trend if things aren't changed at that particular layer of the Bitcoin stack.
Yeah, and there's all this theory about, what does the pool itself really represent? What's the hash, the makeup of the hash inside that pool? When will that hash leave? What will make them leave? I don't know all the answers to that, but I do think that mining in secret, or having the ability to mine in secret, is probably going to be huge as we get into this nation state level, as you said. That's going to be a challenge.
Yes. I mean, you mentioned SegWit pressure leading, or fee pressure leading to SegWit. I think we're going to have a similar thing, particularly here in the United States. I'm not sure if you've been following along, but the letter the Treasury sent the Senate Banking and House Financial Services Committees a couple of weeks ago, suggesting regulations they want to see on the Bitcoin ecosystem, designating mining pools as financial institutions that have to follow the letter of the law. The Bank Secrecy Act was one of those suggestions. Then quickly after that, you had the Senate Banking Committee meet with the executives from the largest banks in the United States, and that's where you had Elizabeth Warren and Jamie Dimon essentially saying, we need to ban Bitcoin, get tougher on it. They're evading these things. And then obviously yesterday, Senator Warren came out, proposed a bill that included all the suggestions from the Treasury and just built on the last 2 weeks of posturing from the Treasury and that Senate Banking Committee. So I think that could be pressure. And as it pertains to mining pools specifically, the way a lot of these pools do things now, if we're steel manning this and playing devil's advocate, you could easily see how regulators would point at the way they distribute rewards to individual miners and say, hey, yeah, they're essentially holding a Bitcoin treasury and paying you out. They're technically not paying you out from the block. And so I think Ocean Pool's efforts to distribute block rewards directly from the Coinbase transaction is a design that could prevent regulators from being able to point like, hey, you're building up a Bitcoin treasury and dispersing it.
But they'll still have a threshold themselves algorithmically, won't they?
What do you mean?
I don't think they're going to, I think it's still going to be threshold based. It's not going to be every block it goes. At least I didn't think so. I thought there's still going to be a threshold.
No.
You've accumulated somewhere and then you'll pay it out.
Yes. Well, no, you don't. You can do it directly from the Coinbase. It's just how you do the shares accounting and the variance. It increased variance risk, essentially.
Are you sure it's going to be every block?
No. So like,
I'm not up to date on it, but
if I have one ASIC and I'm mining to a pool that's doing Coinbase reward distribution, like every time they mine a block, I'm not going to get a reward. They're just going to calculate the shares that I'm accumulating over time. And then once I hit a certain threshold where I'm able to have Bitcoin distributed to me directly from the Coinbase reward that isn't dust and it's actually spendable, that will happen.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying.
Variance
but you're saying Ocean is going to do away with the thresholds? To have no thresholds, basically.
No, they're going to have thresholds.
Okay. Well, then those thresholds would still theoretically have, this is where the argument comes in, right? As long as you have a threshold, it's still going to be the pool operator that's managing that until the threshold gets paid out. It's the same argument.
Yeah, but they're not holding the Bitcoin on the balance sheet waiting for that threshold to be hit. Once you've reached the threshold, the next block
It's
that's
going to be
mined.
like algorithmically.
This is the way I
managed.
understand it.
Yeah, but I think it's whether it's on their balance sheet or whether it's in.
I think it's an accounting practice and not necessarily like a balance sheet management practice. You get what I mean?
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It's fine. Yeah, I shouldn't go on about it because I'm not too up to date myself. But I think what I'm saying is they as in the government is going to fight hard as far as like what really defines a threshold.
Yeah.
And it could be that they might say that if you're managing any sort of threshold, no matter how you're doing it, then you're opening yourself up to all the regulations, the security risk, all that stuff.
Yeah, and this gets into a broader conversation. I forget where I brought this up. This was in Nashville. Matt and I did a live rabbit hole recap a couple of months ago. And what we're talking about now is like unique ways to design around this problem at the technical level. And maybe the question we should be asking is everybody's trying to figure out these technical cockamamie solutions to these regulatory issues is, do we need to shift the defensive posture to an attacking posture philosophically on the idea of the Bank Secrecy Act, KYC, AML, and all of this? What will be more effective? Spending a lot of time designing technical solutions to this, or meeting the regulators in the battlefield of ideas and highlighting the Bank Secrecy Act, KYC, AML, wholly ineffective, serves essentially as nothing more than a way to create regulatory moats for incumbents that create this two-tiered system where they can pay a fine, which is the cost of doing business, and get away with murder. And the little guy gets thrown in a cage for the smallest of infractions.
Horrible.
Is there a technical solution, or is this more philosophical?
I think it's both. I think anything we can do to fight this madness coming into Bitcoin. I mean, this is what we've been talking about for 15 years, right? And not always on the technical level. Certainly, we talk about SegWit, talk about what we're talking about now with fees and inscriptions and ordinals and mining thresholds. These are all technical things. But I don't have it handy, but I did a presentation at BTC Prague about mining. Not mining, but the dangers of centralizing gold, your country's gold. And I've probably mentioned in the show before, but the story of the Polish gold in World War II is the most remarkable thing. How the Nazis invaded them September 1st, 1939. The Soviets invaded September 17th. And literally on unmarked buses, the Poles are going from each central bank branch, taking it down through Romania. They get on a train, they get it on a boat, through the Black Sea and into the Bosphorus. They get it on a train into Lebanon. They get a French ship taking it over to Marseille, to the south of France. And then the Nazis invade France in June of 1940. And the Polish gold is on the run, as well as now like Belgian gold, French gold, Dutch gold. It goes to the coast in Brittany, just south of the British Isles, of the UK. Dunkirk is happening like immediately. There's retreats. Somehow they get it on this French ships. They take it down to Africa, to Senegal, French Senegal, to Dakar. And this Polish gold, a lot of gold, hides out in the desert there for like 3 years of the war. And it's an amazing story. If there's a few places you can find that story. There's a book called by George Tabor called Chasing Gold, is where I read the best encounter of that. But anyway, I talked about that, and just in general, what was happening in the U.S. at that time was, as gold was fleeing Europe due to tyrants and dictators, as they do in government, more gold circulated or flowed into the U.S. than ever in its history. So by like 1940, there was already 70% of the world's monetary gold was in the New York Fed. And then it's like, well, if the worst of the worst is what dictators and tyrants can do to you, kill you, take your gold, and that's not even that's central bank gold, by the way. There's actually the the crux of the presentation is, and I'm not making a moral relativistic claim of these piles of gold, but the worst of the Nazis did, literally taking gold from the teeth of Jews and then killing them, sending them to oblivion. That's the worst of the worst. That percentage of gold it's like smaller than a quarter. The easiest way that the Nazis took gold, the most, careful my words, this most swift way that they took gold was they just walked into a central bank and they took the gold. And that's what they used to finance their war. So 80% of the gold that the Nazis stole was, walking into the Czechoslovak bank, walking into the Bank of Austria, and just taking the gold. So it's the point there is, it's the age old thing. Like, we talk about all the technical stuff, but you're still going to get to the same problem with Bitcoin. Is if you KYC it, you have, at the end of the day, a few bankers with signing rights of Bitcoin transactions. If it ever becomes that centralized again, you're at the same risk that happened with the gold in World War II. And then the other thing is, I didn't plan on getting this long tirade, sorry, but the other thing is, if you say, okay, that's the worst of the worst, they can either steal it from you, kill you individually, or just walk into your nation's central bank and steal the wealth of your people. That's the worst of the worst. Supposedly the best was what the U.S. did. The U.S. had 70% of the world's gold, had a golden opportunity literally to remake the monetary framework. The Bretton Woods system started in 1945, 46. How long did that last? Not even 30 years. Not even 30 years they couldn't make it last. So it's like, the lessons are just there again and again and again for those that are willing to pay attention. This is why you got to keep it decentralized. You got to keep it out of the hands of central bankers and governments, and you got to be able to mine in secret and all those things. So anyway, that's my little soapbox on that one.
Well, number one, Chasing Gold should be a movie if it isn't already. That sounds
an unbelievable story.
Like an epic
unbelievable
story. Epic story. And number two, I don't know if we've touched on this in the past, but I think that's part of the beauty of Satoshi's supply schedule. 19.5 million Bitcoin. More than 19.5 million have been distributed to the market already due to the nascency of the exchange infrastructure in the early days. A vast majority of those coins are held in self-custody. There's probably 2 to 4 million floating on regulated exchanges. 3 to 5 that are lost. So that's 5 to 9 that are accounted for there. So you have like 10 to 14 million on the market. Free floating, accessible, held in self-custody. Rough Marty math on the go there. But that's encouraging. But again, it will be interesting, particularly with the ETF coming to market, which seems pretty imminent. I mean, there's a lot of people who don't like the stress of managing their keys. Actually recorded with one of them yesterday, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna take some of my Bitcoin held in multi-sig, sell it, take the tax hit, and then buy the ETF, just because I don't want to worry about that," which is disheartening. Yeah,
it's a tough lesson. I mean, I'm not judging. I'm just saying it gets deep when you think how deep that rabbit hole is and where it can go and the bad things that can happen and the slippery slope and all that. So, I empathize with him for trying to, worry about his personal safety or whatever. But then, you can keep multi-sigs pretty safe, how you manage it and whatever. We don't have to go into an individual case, but I completely hear what you're saying, and that's a microcosm of what most people are probably thinking. Certainly people that are new to Bitcoin. I mean, anyone who wanted to go down the Bitcoin rabbit hole by now has been down it. The only other people that I think are going to go down it are the younger generation, right? I mean, would you agree?
Yes. This guy was a boomer.
Okay. Well, that even helps even more, I'd say. But there's even no other Peter Schiff type boomers that have just been hanging out, right? I mean, I guess it's called a boomer or whatever, but like Michael Saylor's type generation, he only really got interested in 2020. It was relatively late, I'd say, for someone his age to really go hard. I don't think you're going to have many more like him. I could be wrong, but I think they're only coming from the younger generation. You know, like going deep into trying to solve Bitcoin's these types of problems, because custody, non-custody, scaling, it's only gonna happen from the younger generation. So
Yeah, it's really disheartening, especially when you juxtapose it with the backdrop of what's going on here in the United States. And maybe you can transition this into your optimism for the states. But as we roll into the 2024 election, the ETF seems imminent. It seems like the ETF is the Trojan horse for the Elizabeth Warrens and Dick Durbins of the world to point at this regulated Bitcoin exposure vehicle and say, here's your Bitcoin exposure. This is what you need to do. Everything else is not allowed. And that's
it's a MSB, money services business, that's illegal.
Yeah. And that's what, I mean, they're trying. I'm not sure if you saw the bill that hit the floor yesterday, but they want to make it so open source software has to embed KYC AML in their wallet infrastructure, mining pools, full node validators. Full nodes are included. Like if you run a full node, you're a money service transmitter. You need to
It's absurd.
do KYC AML and all the transactions going through.
Certainly shows they're scared, right?
Yes, definitely. That's the other thing. Go back to the philosophical thing. That's one thing we've learned over the last 3 years, particularly, is fear is a great tool that these states have. And they leverage the fear when they're weak and they're scared. It's a projection tactic. They're going to project what they fear onto the rest of the world and try to make them more fearful so that they act in a way that the government wants them to. And that's, I don't have an answer to this, but something I've been saying on a lot of shows is how do we instill confidence in individuals to have that mental switch go off in their head to recognize that their primitive fear sensors are being triggered to incite a particular reaction, and how to avoid that.
Well, let me transition on your transition here back to Argentina. I have one more chart, Logan. This is pretty interesting. So Argentina, as we know, lots of debt problems, gargantuan debt relative to the country. This is the official, central bank rate of the peso. This goes back to 2002. So it's like 2 pesos per dollar. Things starts to get a little bit crazy. 2016, 15 pesos, and it starts to go over 100 during COVID. Yeah, during COVID. Okay. And then this major ramp up and all the problems. And then we have our friend Javier Milei coming in, which is amazing. First anarcho-capitalist ever to be sworn in to a nation state, which I think is fascinating. So we should talk about that. But I brought this up specifically for him. So this is the official rate. Now I'll show you the black market rate. Okay. All right. So just a little bit here in the 2012s, it's like double, right? Gets double the official. But here you're talking like 10 pesos black market versus 5 official. But if you get here to the COVID days, still staying about double, which is interesting. But now it's been to triple basically, and this is the problem of Argentina, right? This is why they're talking dollarization. This is what Milei wants to talk about. But here's a really interesting thing. I don't have the data much further back, but since June, I've taken the Argentinian price, the Argentinian peso price per Bitcoin on Binance, divided by the US dollar price per Bitcoin on Binance. That should also back you into a black market peso price, right? Do your little dimensional analysis. If you take the pesos per Bitcoin divided by the dollars per Bitcoin, you're just going to get pesos per dollar. All right. So I'll show you from June the peso price per Bitcoin. The peso price per dollar, Bitcoin derived. This is pretty interesting. So this black line, just to remind you, this comes from Blue Dollar. There's lots of sites, right? This has gone on forever. It's just parallel rate, non-official rate, black market rate. But Bitcoin, because it's such a free asset in the world, you can actually see it tracks the black market rate without having to like go to a black market. This is the Bitcoin. This is the actual price per Bitcoin on Binance in pesos divided by the actual price in dollars. You will get basically a black market peso rate, which I think is really fascinating. Even a little bit better at some levels, but pretty much tracks the black market rate. So again, this is just another reason why Bitcoin needs to survive. It helps people understand the market. It helps people understand the devaluation of their money. And this is just,
That's a beautiful chart.
A beautiful example of how Bitcoin can bring clarity to your financial life. And, this is why Bitcoin is big in South America and has been for decades now.
This is incredible data.
Yeah. Yeah. So you see that, like, without doing anything, Bitcoin will give you what the actual price of the peso should be. I think it's just an amazing thing. And I'm starting to analyze these a little bit more, like with the Naira, a couple other sort of larger currencies that pretty much standard run a black market because the official rate is so abusive to the citizens, basically. So anyway, point is, it has to stay. And Elizabeth Warren's never going to talk about this, never going to talk about the fact that Bitcoin's actually going to show you the true rate of, what the Argentinian peso should be worth, so on and so forth. So anyway, we'll see where it goes. We'll see what Milei can do. He's obviously thinking dollarization just for the volatility of fiat currency. They're going to do that. But I'm very heartened by him getting into office. I think it's fascinating.
All right, let's jump into this because I got some questions. It's hot on Milei. I'm not sure how hot I am. I agree. The fact that he was elected is an incredible signal. If anything, people are pissed off enough. They recognize there's a massive problem. The platform that he ran on connected with a lot of people, which, as a free market enthusiast myself, is very encouraging to see that the people of Argentina threw up their hands and said, enough it is enough. We're going the opposite direction. But as it pertains to destroying the central bank and dollarizing, does that essentially just make Argentina a vassal state of the United States and the central bank?
I think if they stay within the banking system, yes. But if that is like, following all the letter of the law of the IMF and everything else.
Well, that's the thing.
Having that, yeah. But here's the thing as well. The dollar. Oh, I should have pulled this chart up for you. The Fed has lost control of international dollars, let's say, probably since the 80s, but for sure since the global financial crisis. Okay. There's this, everybody always quotes M2 because it's the only available money supply. That's not the money supply you should use. M2 is just the retail sort of other monetary instruments besides a demand deposit. But you need to look at M3. That is retail plus institutional, like money market funds, all this stuff. But M3 also includes something called Eurodollars. Eurodollars are basically dollars that are outside of the Federal Reserve's control. What does that mean? That's dollars that are just created deposits outside of the United States. And that's a huge market. It's a gigantic market. No one actually knows how big it is. I'm trying to research like central banks like Argentina because they do post pretty detailed non-Argentinian peso foreign currency accounts. And you can kind of aggregate that. It takes a long time and it's, you never know if it's all dollars, maybe it's some euros. But anyway, trying to get to some sort of a Eurodollar figure. The Fed has not published a Eurodollar figure since 2006. And I've done videos on this. I don't know if the chart's ready. I'm not going to pull it up now. But basically, if you saw where M3 was in 2006, it's like here. And then if you go back and later on, there was all this Dodd-Frank and more regulations and stuff. And they're trying to get the Fed, which is actually good regulations. Remember there was with the Ron Paul days, there was the audit the Fed, all these things, trying to get more and more data because the Fed was not publishing shit in the 2000s, really. And finally they started to publish more things like repurchase agreements, other sort of non-bank instruments into this, which are all part of M3, by the way. Repurchase agreements are part of M3, money market funds, all these things. And I went back, I did a video on this. If you backdate it and you make your own money supply, which includes all these institutional accounts, you have this M3, which is something like here. And then you look at the recreated M3 at the same time what the Fed was saying it's like way up here, and that does not even include Eurodollars, because I don't know the Eurodollar. No one knows how many Eurodollars it truly are. Could be $10 trillion worth. It could be 50 trillion. It could be $100 trillion worth, because it's a shadow banking. Think about the Panama Papers, the Paradise Papers. There were 10s, 20s, 30s of trillions of dollars of value that is there. Now, I'm not saying it's all in dollars. It's hard to quantify this type of stuff, but this is the broad money. These are things that are priced in dollars. Stable coins are in dollars. Now, I know stable coins are on shitcoin networks, but it is, and it's also very small, by the way. Stablecoin market is 100 billion. I'm talking about a Eurodollar market, which is maybe 100 trillion. My point of all this, Marty, is that there is a vast pool of wealth that the Federal Reserve never tells you, but it's just a fact. It's well outside of their control. And it just means if someone's going to trade in dollars outside of the Federal Reserve Bank, sort of IMF purview, outside of that purview in a foreign land, then that's a Eurodollar, and it's a huge market. So that's a long-winded way of saying I think that Argentina has a big chance. They might be able to do it with some, Bitcoin derivatives or something of dollars, but whatever you can do to stabilize your currency and definitely not get captured by the Federal Reserve is a win, in my opinion. And I do not think that they will stand for becoming a vassal state. I mean, everybody already knows they've been screwed over by the CIA down in Latin America for decades. So I don't think they would want to repeat this stuff with the monetary system. So a long-winded way of saying the Eurodollar is way bigger than anybody knows. The Federal Reserve has not had control of it since the 80s. They don't even know the amount. They've never told the amount. And if you even look at backdated M3s like I have, not including Eurodollars, it's multiples more than they've ever said it is. So they don't have control. They do not have control of that money supply at the end of the day.
Yeah. I brought the IMF too.
Something to keep in mind.
Yes. No, I mean, that would be the most bullish thing if they dollarize via something like stable coins. In my mind, it would show that they're trying to not become a U.S. vassal state. Who knows what's going on behind the scenes? Another thing, I think they should go to the IMF and say, we're not paying back this debt.
Sure. Yeah, the IMF screws a lot of countries that way. They tried to screw the Baltics after the global financial crisis. We didn't let them, and that was a great thing. Paul Krugman got in a lot of fight with Baltic. Tomas Ilves was a Columbia trained, bless you,
Thank you.
American Estonian president, got into a lot of great Twitter fights with Paul Krugman. And yeah, we didn't let them screw with us after 2008. But anyway, overall, I would say the point is America will shoot themselves in the foot at some point if they keep demanding that basically the whole financial system just does their dirty work and they have to make all these forms and reports and everything to the Fed. Because I've seen that being an American abroad, being an American European, it's harder for me. Opening accounts, doing reporting, all that stuff, it's very hard. And I'm just one person. I mean, I'm, got some personal businesses and stuff, but that's very, very small. If you're talking about big companies having to deal with all that, it just gets so onerous. And if you're a country like Argentina, where you're going to look out for your citizens first, it is very possible to still utilize a currency like the dollar and not follow those rules. And if you just say, look, American companies can't, we're just not going to follow these forms, or American companies are just going to have to have their accounts closed or just use stable coins. Who knows? I think the possibilities are there. And I think it'd be a great thing if they do dollarize. It just shows that the central bank system is breaking down. I mean, Argentina and Brazil prove that the most. They've had 5-6 currencies respectively over the last each over the last 50, 60 years. And
yeah, Logan, pull up the tweet. Go to the information above. So Argentina has an average annual inflation rate of 192% since 1944. Really leaning into the IMF here. They joined the IMF in 1956 and have participated in 21 standby agreements, which are essentially loans, since 1958. It's roughly one every 3 years. It seems to me like the IMF may be a big part of Argentina's problems. Like, how many times they've gone to the trough? 21 times, potentially more. I think they might have done another loan between May of last year and today. At what point do people throw their hands up against the IMF and say, no, this is egregious, predatory debt that we can't pay back, and we're not going to?
Absolutely. Logan, if you just switch to mine really quick, it's a whole sea of numbers. I'm not going to go through it, but the very last row, I don't know if you can see where my cursor is.
Can you zoom in?
I'm already zoomed in, believe it or not. I'll try to zoom in more. I don't know. No, it's not zooming. Anyway, it's Argentina. You can find all this on the Twitter post as well on the website. But over the last month, meaning July, basically they increased it 170%. This is money supply growth. Okay, over the last year, 48%, and since 1970, this is actual weighted money. It's very similar to what the trading economics figure is, but other than looking at whether inflation rates or exchange rates, this is actual money supply growth. It's weighted average at 100%, 100% increase in the money stock. So it's a gigantic figure, and just that system is not going to work for them anymore. I'd love for them to go into Bitcoin, but Millet, I think I heard him say as well, like it's too volatile at the moment for them. But dollarizing would be a good thing. I really think it would be. But this guy, just so you know, one more other thought on him. I mean, Murray Rothbard had a article where he talked about how he's very skeptical about the anarcho-capitalist politician. Right? He equated him to Superman. It's like you stay within the system, you work hard, you work your way up the ranks. You're a good person, you're a good politician, but you're just working hard because you know that once you become president, once you get to the top, you're going to rip off your suit. You're going to have the big A, the big ANCAP on your chest. That he said that's never going to work. That's what he said. He actually made interesting exceptions. Well, really one for Ron Paul, because he started believing Ron Paul pretty hardcore, as rightly so, I think. But his main point is that it's very difficult to do that within the system. And I think in the context of the United States government, I think that's 100% true. However, we can get back to the U.S. before the optimism I was telling you about. But in the case of Argentina, I think it is a historic moment. I was on some chats with my Latin American friends, and I mean, this guy's a genuine ANCAP. I mean, he's a genuine outsider. He's respectful. Also love, by the way, that he hates dictators that abuse state power. So like he had a lot of warm things to say about Ukraine, and Zelensky was there, and I know that's going to trigger a lot of listeners, but in my opinion, he has all of the right ideas and just the right things going on. Am I putting all of my eggs in that basket, or saying that the Argentinian economy is just going to soar and it's all going to be roses? Obviously not, but it may just be the right type of economy where some good things can happen. Just this peaceful, nice Latin American, great people down there, warm, amazing climate. It may be that they can finally turn it all around, and just if he just starts gutting, he already cut out like half the ministries, at least I saw his first executive order. So I'm cautiously optimistic, let's say.
I mean, it would be an incredible case study.
It will be. It will be an incredible case study.
That's the worst. Come up.
That's the worst.
It won't come out, but it's coming up.
Yeah.
But I mean, Argentina, very resource rich.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that they've had these incredible bouts of hyperinflation over the last 70 years, really. They seem somewhat successful. I mean, in terms of having a society that operates well considering the conditions relatively.
With 100% monetary inflation,
Yeah,
over the last 50 years. No, it's
I mean,
incredible.
when you compare Argentina to Venezuela, it seems like Argentina's
Yeah, and
sustained
Venezuela used to be
itself.
the richest and
Yeah,
got taken. So, I mean, it's all fragile, man. I can tell you, how fragile those feelings of security and goodwill, and like your leaders know what they're doing. They feel like when I've said it before over the last year. If it feels the same, we feel very, very at risk here, very uneasy over here with everything that's happening from our dictatorial neighbors. And I love that a guy like Milei is in here, and he's hardcore. He hates Putin with a passion. He hates any dictator, any Latin American dictator with a passion. Anybody that's just a thug and is going to use state power, he hates them. I think it's pretty cool to see.
yeah. I mean, obviously El Salvador made waves years ago with Bukele coming to power, but on a relative basis, they're so much smaller than Argentina. It'll be interesting to see if there are sort of partnerships made.
Yeah,
I don't know if Milei would call Bukele a dictator. I know some people do, but it seems like the approval rating there is legit.
Yeah. There's definitely some controversy there, but there's also some interesting
hard data, particularly around crime. That's what I mean. I would love to see. I mean, I love going to Central America. I've never been to Argentina. There's just incredible landscape, incredible people, nice, genuine people that I've come into contact with. Like, it would be great to see Central South America break away from like quasi-colonization that has existed over the last few centuries.
Yep. Like I said, they've dealt with the CIA long enough. They've dealt with American issues, and I take your point about the dollar being a risk for them. But like I said, that's we already talked about that. But I do think that there are ways out there, and just the fact that that's a genuine ANCAP that's now the head of state in 2023, like on planet Earth, is pretty. It's pretty cool. It's very cool.
I mean, is this what Rothbard was saying? Is a president who's an ANCAP an oxymoron?
Yeah, he never thought it could happen, basically. And like I said, his one exception was Ron Paul. He did eventually think that Ron Paul could get it, and Rothbard died in '95, but Ron Paul ran for president in '88, and Rothbard was hopeful for him, but it's actually happened in the state of Argentina, and I'm fairly confident he would take that back. He would be very excited as well to see him. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of good vibes going on down there. Hope that he stays safe. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, it's a good way to get cooed. It's just to be a president who's an anarcho-capitalist.
I shouldn't. I didn't want to even say that. It sounds way too negative for the way I feel about it. I think that the guy has a lot of respect, actually, for what he's been through and the way that he's portrayed in the media. And yeah, even if there is, like you said, there's a lot of people that are just voting for him in spite of what they might see as some sort of out of the box behavior, let's say, or out of the box type thinking. They just want to change, and he actually has the fundamentals that might be able to give them that.
How crazy is it that you have to mention, like, I hope he says stay safe. Like, yeah, that is the absolute state of the world. They know that we know that they know that we know they're oppressive. Like, I think it's just like an open secret. Like, the power structure is so strong. If the populace votes somebody in that goes against the grain of the international order, they will get murdered. You have to like preface that in day-to-day conversation, which is just insane to think. This is where we are in 2023. It's probably been this way throughout human history, but
yeah, I have no doubt that he will be safe and he will do well. He's got a lot of ardent supporters, but I hope that people give him a chance, and I'm sure they will. Got no other choice, frankly.
No. Let's go Argentina.
We
should
should.
be rooting. We should be rooting for these people.
Yeah.
These people.
The
Argentines.
I'd like to see Fernando actually later next year. And I've never been down to Brazil or Argentina. I've been to Chile a few times and met some really nice Argentinians there, and we've had them on our show and stuff. So it would be great. I don't know where LibitConf is next year, but should be in Argentina. It would be awesome.
It is.
Is it?
Wait. I guess
December. Usually in December, right?
Google slow. Loading. BitConf was the 9th to the 12th this year. It was in Buenos Aires this year. Last month.
Yeah. I was in November. Yeah. It's a fun one. Cool people. Very nice people. Yeah, man. Well, I think there's a lot of positivity there. I think there's a lot of positivity for Bitcoin. I think there's a lot of negativity with U.S. regulation, but
who knows what will happen? Elizabeth Warren's track record for proposing bills and getting them passed is literally zero. I think she's proposed something like 650. None of them have passed. So
I think the egregiousness of it is pretty apparent for all to see, and I think that's going to be checked pretty strongly. But again, I'm not one to really put my faith at all in any politics other than defense, which again I know is going to trigger a lot of people as well, and that's purely for selfish reasons, or not even selfish reasons, just reasons of what I see as sort of reality in the 21st century. That's something you have to worry about. I would love to have a purely 8 billion sovereign flags and private defense agencies and insurance for everybody. I really would. But it's tough. It's tough right now. It's tough right now in Europe. And like I said, if you juxtapose Europe's problems with America's, America does have a boatload of debt too. It's never getting paid back. But, other than that, we actually have free movement of capital, free movement of labor, and great entrepreneurial spirit. And Europe is just, I don't know, we can't even get our security right. We have a major security problem in Europe. So the whole NATO, I think it's going to be interesting if Trump comes in. Maybe more interesting for you guys, more scary for us, because if Trump pushes, and Trump, look, again, I'm trying to be honest on all sides. Like if Trump says he's going to either threaten to pull out of NATO or pull back funding, like all of the countries that know the problems of an imperial dictator, which is all the Eastern European countries, of which I'm in one right now, the Baltics, the Czechs, the Slovaks, Bulgarians, Romanians, Poles, most notably the Poles, and even the Finns and the Swedes now, like all of us know that we need to increase our security. And that's totally because we have a dictatorial power on our eastern borders. That's what we're going to have to do. But it's a sad state when I see just the way that people talk about it in the U.S. Like if American wants to pull out of NATO, they would have every right to do it. But I'll tell you that people in Eastern and Central Europe will have a backup alliance anyway, and so I feel good about that at least.
Have you been following the developments in the tech or the defense startup space here in the United States? Companies like Anduril.
No.
That'll be really interesting to see. So Anduril, Palmer Luckey created Oculus Rift, and they got kicked out of Facebook. He got all pissed off and started this defense startup called Anduril. They're basically building like the autonomous drone fleet talked about in sci-fi books of decades past. And it's, they've done some demos in recent weeks. I think they had this one drone called the Roadrunner, and it's insane. Like the capabilities of these drones is on par, if not better, than the military grade drones that are being produced by the Raytheons of the world. And there's something like 1/10 of the cost. Point being, it'll be interesting to see if these defense startups like Anduril can reduce the cost of these defensive technologies to a point where it becomes very easy for anybody to arm themselves with defense technology. And whether or not that gets opened up, who knows if the U.S. government's going to say only we can get this for X amount of time. Right. But Anduril is just one example. I think there's many others. It's been a really interesting trend here in the States. It seems like you haven't been following it, but like of tech guys starting defense startups.
Sounds like a psyop.
Does it?
It just sounds like, I mean, if
it's all Peter Thiel backed, so Palantir, all that stuff.
Well, yeah, I mean, Thiel's interesting. It always gets murky, right, when the government comes in and controls everything, which is obviously not ideal. But if you can make it happen where the private sector is, managing that stuff as much as they can, and no subsidies from the government, all that stuff, that would be obviously most ideal. But yeah, again, this is pie in the sky because we're nowhere near there right now. And I think that the Ukraine war has shown a lot of usage of drones, which are changing the landscape. There's a good campaign from Timothy Snyder, wonderful historian of the region, where he's going to try to raise, I mean, he has been raising, and a lot of people have been raising for the Ukrainian defense there. And I think that that's definitely an interesting space. But yeah, I'm not counting on this anarcho-capitalist sort of world anytime soon. Unfortunately, I do think that the government is always going to stay involved, which is unfortunate, but that's where it is.
Why can't we rid ourselves of these governments?
I don't know. I mean,
there's a big age thing here too. They're all like all the people, particularly in control of the United States government, are going to die in like the next 10 to 20 years.
Yeah. They also play on both sides, right? So again, trying to appeal to, I know a lot of the anarcho-capitalists that are listening from America. If Texas could secede and if Texas could be its own state and still keep all the free trade open and have a lot of the things that, a lot of the political football that we saw happened with Brexit in the UK, if you could avoid that entirely, I would say it'd be great. But the problem is it's so politicized, it's so centralized, it'd be very difficult to do that. So what do I mean? Like, Brexit is kind of good in theory. It's like, well, we don't really agree with all the profligate spending that Brussels is doing. Let's secede. But they didn't really have a plan. And anyway, they found out that their populace actually liked a lot of things like the European open trade, open borders, open travel. All that's ripped away. So the Brits are pissed about it. I mean, they might even have another referendum in a few years. The Scots might have a referendum to leave Britain and join back in the EU. So, I mean, it's not easy. It's not easy to, like,
well, who makes it hard in this example of Brexit? Who's making it hard? It's Europe, right? Like,
yeah,
like the pissy X who's like, "Fuck you, we're not going to do trade with you. You don't have any autonomy."
That's what I'm saying. And so, who would make it hard if Texas, who had every right to leave, who would make it hard on them? It would be primarily the elites in the Northwest saying, "Okay, well, you're not going to get this, this, and this. By the way, you're going to have this problem."
Yeah.
What did I say? Yeah.
Northwest.
Sorry.
People in Seattle aren't going to tell Texas what to do.
Good point. But even old Bezos, he moved to Miami, right? I mean, this is just another example of someone who, like, I'm never going to, dog Amazon, the company, or anything for what they do. But, Bezos has an X 1,000 square foot mansion in DC with like a massive ballroom. Like, this is a guy who, even better than Gates, stayed out there in Seattle, built an amazing business, hardcore, great entrepreneur. But then at some point, right? It's like, why would he buy a massive property in DC with a ballroom? Is it because, I mean, he used to live, I mean, I know he's in Miami now. Okay. Also pretty beautiful, a little bit humid for me, but he was in the most beautiful area of the world, Pacific Northwest. Why would he buy that? Why would he buy luxury property in the DC area with a ballroom attached. I mean, there's only one reason, and it's
a
all
relatively cheap
things,
way to buy politicians, you know.
it's all the things we're complaining about. So that's a very hard sell, man. It's hard. Maybe this startup, I haven't really followed it. Maybe this little startup culture of defense can get away from that, but you just got to cut it off. This is why I think the Bitcoin is like the last bastion. If you can't keep Bitcoin separate from the state, then it is over. You go back to the same thing I was talking about with the Nazi gold. You just walk in and take it, tell you how you can spend it.
Yeah, and that's why I think I'm an eternal optimist, because Bitcoin being a last bastion, if it falls prey to this, we get the dystopian future. We've always found a way throughout history. Obviously, it's been very volatile. But quality of life, up and to the right, overall, you can debate whether the quality of life, particularly here in America, is at a peak or coming down. If you look at deaths of despair, overdoses.
Some things debatable in the U.S., very true.
Birth rate, life expectancy, all trending in the wrong direction right now.
Just rattled off a few of them.
Yeah. But I'm here drinking a nice warm coffee, sitting in a nice chair, connected to high-speed internet, talking to somebody on the other side of the world.
Things looking good in Texas, I would say.
Yeah.
Nice red state.
Texit, baby. I do think they actually... Look, have you been following this? Didn't they put something... I think they proposed something at the legislature that would set the stage for a Texit at some point in the future.
Learn from the UK. That's all I would say. You have to have a full plan. You have to know what you're going to do.
Well,
when
all right.
they come at you.
If we're wargaming this out, I mean, Texas has way more leverage than the UK did over Europe. Like, the UK doesn't have any natural resources. Yeah, we're like the oil capital of the United States.
Well, that would be more up the a few states north. No, they probably have a little bit more.
The Bakken definitely has a lot.
Yeah,
the Keystone's coming from Canada.
Yeah, but just south of there as well.
Yeah, but North Dakota, South Dakota, they're gonna team up with New York State, or are they gonna be like, Texas, you're good?
No, that's true. I mean, if you can get, well, then what are you talking about? Are you talking about just Texas, or are you talking about a whole swath of Middle America just seceding? Because that's a whole different thing too.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, we got to have the plan though. Brexit is a very good example of. And look, there's a lot of European libertarians I've talked to that are pissed off about how it all went down as well, because it's just they've tilted the game completely in their favor. When I say they, I mean like just the statists. Like, free trade means one thing. It means free trade, right? But when you have your negotiating partner on the way out, which, by the way, doesn't want you to leave and is like threatening you with all these things, and then you're leaving, like you said, maybe with not enough leverage, but maybe with some certain perks. But bottom line, you don't have a plan, you can't negotiate it, and you're just in this sort of weird poker game. You're going to piss off a huge swath of the population if you can't deliver on the free trade, the free movement, and the free labor. And that's what happened with Brexit. So you'd have to, it's one of those things that you'd have to get a good contingency of states to go along with you. I think it would be very tough to just have like Texas go it alone, and then you have New York and DC to just pull all these bullshit regulations on you last minute. And what are you going to do? I mean, they're still Americans. So the game theory of that is very difficult when it comes down to actually seceding.
I think Texas, Oklahoma, North Dakota, Wyoming. Those four. Very energy rich.
Yeah.
Very freedom oriented, but obviously geographically dispersed.
Bitcoin oriented. I think you'd want to be connected as well. You want to be landlocked to everybody that's going to go with you.
Yeah, but that's what I was saying. Louisiana's not coming. New Mexico's not coming. So you got to go to Oklahoma.
Yeah. Yeah. You get the panhandle there. I mean, I think that it's a wonderful theory, and it's a uh, great libertarian writer. This is called the Rethinking the American Union for the 21st Century. I thought, and he just talks about how distorted the point of all this, right? And what I'm saying is, it's the game is tilted in the favor of the DC types, the Northeast, the New York types, and they're just going to try to push that as far as they can. Um, even
Kent
though, like,
Brown.
no, the book I was talking about, no, it's not him.
Kent Brown and Marshall DeRosa. Donald Livingston.
Donald Livingston, that's the one. Donald Livingston. Rethinking the American Union. Is that right?
Rethinking the American Union for the 21st Century.
Okay, I think it's
yeah.
It's a collection of essays, but Livingston always talks about how, if you just look at the proportions of Congress seats, of population, of all these things, like back in the days of the colonies as opposed to now, I mean, there's just no comparison. It's so skewed, it's so centralized. Like that's what you're going to deal with. So they're going to throw the whole kitchen sink at you when they talk about what you're going to have to do to go along with your own Texit plan. Like, you're not just going to be able to just walk out the door. Like, you're going to have to sacrifice a lot.
Yeah. The other route is just, it dies. The Northeast DC, New York stranglehold dies with a whimper, where people just stop respecting them.
Maybe.
You have these gray market operations that operate, and then eventually they're toothless.
And then you got the whole nuclear thing as well, is how many nukes do you have in that area? Because that's again another horrible thing the governments have brought on us. Like, no one likes nukes, but governments gave us nukes. So now what are we going to do? Can we privatize all nukes? This is a huge thing, obviously, that we've dealt with nuclear blackmail for 30 years from Russia, but particularly in the last 2 years from the invasion. The one thing that I agree with Mežinskis on is that he rightly pointed out in the 1990s that Ukraine giving up their nukes from the Budapest memorandum signing, which we were saying should be invoked in 2014, by the way. So the Budapest memorandum, you know what that is?
Yeah, we've discussed it.
Yeah. So it's like UK, US, I think France, and Russia, all nuclear powers at the time, signed, said, okay, we guarantee collectively Ukraine's security, but you're going to have to give up your nukes back to Moscow. And see what happens less than 30 years later. So Mežinskis did say that in the 90s, and he's correct. So nuclear power is a major deterrent, and you can't get away from the discussion, unfortunately, without talking about that.
They got to nuke Texas?
You do not want to secede, even from another American state, without having a nuclear arsenal yourself.
2 nukes right here, bro.
It's done. Sign the dotted line. Where's the paperwork?
It's also tiresome.
It is, man.
Why can't we just focus on being productive and building cool things and raising good families and hanging out with our neighbors?
You want me to? I gotta close it here, but you want me to trigger your listeners once more?
It's good for clicks. It's good for views. It's good for engagement. So yes, let's trigger them.
So I think this is an interesting thing. We talk about NATO. You're going to hear this a lot, by the way, with Trump coming in. And again, Trump is right. Everybody in these blue countries, excluding the United Kingdom and Norway, who have been always very strong on their defense, right? Northern flank of NATO. All of these countries here, a little bit lax on their spending and their defense. But this is a map here of Europe during what we called the Cold War, which was not ending with the fall of the Berlin Wall. And so the reason I bring this up, there's a strong vein of libertarians. Dave Smith is one of them. Scott Horton, these guys. I saw a really interesting interview with actually the Comedy Cellar podcast. You ever heard of this?
I've been to the Comedy Cellar many times and never knew they had a podcast.
Yeah, so the owner, Noam Dorman. No, I've been once actually as well. Lived in New York many years ago. Great place, obviously, but they have a podcast, and I've been catching some of it with the Israel-Gaza conflict. Owner's interesting, Noam Dorman. He's had a lot of these guests on that talk about that conflict, but also he had Dave Smith. They talked about Ukraine. Thought it was interesting. But this narrative that just keeps getting repeated, and it's just wrong, is when they had this not 1 inch phrase that was uttered by Secretary of State Baker. This is Bush's Secretary of State to Gorbachev. Said NATO is basically not going to expand by 1 inch. The context of that meeting, just to make it very, very clear for everybody, and this is why we in Eastern Europe care so much about our security, the context of, well, let me just even set the stage even broader. So here we have NATO in the blue, right? And we have the Soviet Union and what we call the Warsaw Pact. The Warsaw Pact is basically the Soviet Union's shitty version of NATO. So it's like at the time, in the 80s, 70s, you had Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria. These are the Warsaw Pact countries. And you also had East Germany, because Germany was split up after the war, divided into 4 zones: American, British, French, and Soviet. So this little not 1 inch discussion happened in February of 1990. I've talked about this all the time, but I just had to say this again because I keep hearing people say this, like hardcore libertarians. So I agree with on most issues, frankly. I really do agree with on most issues. But Dave was trying to tell Noam on this podcast that the Cold War ended with the fall of the Berlin Wall. That's not true at all. The Cold War was still on. When the Berlin Wall fell, the only discussions that were happening, the Berlin Wall fell in November of 1989. The not 1 inch key phrase was in a meeting. It was called the 4+2. So it's, or 2+4, I guess. It's the 4 main powers. It's the U.S., Britain and France, and then the Soviet Union, which is our shitty ally from all of this. So those 4 powers, then you had East and West Germany. At the fall of the Berlin Wall, the only thing that was on Germans' minds or anybody's minds is the reunification of Germany. Nobody is talking or caring about anything else. It's the reunification of Germany. So when the Soviet Union is involved in this, they have like 1 million troops in East Germany. Germany wants them out. Germany wants to reclaim its sovereign territory, which isn't all of its sovereign territory from old times, but whatever, of East and West Germany as of post-World War II borders. When Baker talks about not 1 inch, they're talking about moving NATO equipment or anything else into East Germany while, this is the important thing, while the Soviet Union is their counterpart, while the Soviet Union is in existence, why the Warsaw Pact is in existence. So this not 1 inch thing, just so everybody knows, is this light red state of East Germany. That's what they're talking about. Dave was talking about how it's in the minutes and all this stuff. I've talked about this so many times. It was Stefan Kinsella, a lawyer, by the way. He's like, these are big boys. You don't run a treaty by minutes. First of all, it was minutes. There's no treaty there that happens in any minutes. And the minutes never talk about NATO expanding not 1 inch into the Warsaw Pact countries. How could it? The point is, how could it? Unlike what Dave said in this podcast, the Cold War is very much still on here. This was February of 1990. Soviet Union didn't fall until December of 1991. Thank God it fell peacefully because of people in the UK, in America, a lot of diaspora from Eastern Europe, like my family, Poles, Czechs, Slovaks, Balts. We helped the Soviet Union end peacefully. Also, the Soviet Union, of course, ended itself peacefully economically because it was a disaster. But this is why I feel so strongly about this issue is it's the waters are muddied so much with this thing. Everybody here that is in this Eastern Bloc, Poland, the Czechs, Hungarians, Romanians, even though Hungary's got kind of a little bit borderline dictatorial stuff going on right now, Romania, Bulgaria, we all, once the Soviet Union ended, there was no way, and the Baltics, you see, there aren't even states here. They were incorporated illegally for 50 years in the Soviet Union. We all ran as far as we could from Moscow's influence, Moscow's sphere of influence. So this, just so everybody knows, this not 1 inch comment has nothing to do. How could it be so the whole premise, which he's saying, is that this is a mysterious secret pact between the Reagan and then eventually the Bush administration with Gorbachev and Moscow. First of all, I'm hoping the point is very, very clear now. It's impossible. That universe never existed in February 1990. The Soviet Union is still up here. They're just trying to figure out how to give. The Soviet Union is already bankrupt at this point. They're way in debt, but they hadn't fallen, and nobody knew that they were going to fall in 18 months, or actually close to 2 years. Still 2 years left. And secondly, once they did fall, Gorbachev has no say for any of these countries. So Gorbachev has no say over what Poland does, Czechs, Slovaks, whatever. So there was never any promise, this and that, and it's all about deterrence. So one thing I agree with actually with Netanyahu, is that it is about deterrence. So this is the nuclear stuff. I'm probably triggering a lot of anarcho-capitalists after we talk about all the beautiful anarcho-capitalist theory, but this is what we're really worried about this, because as Millet fears, and as a lot of people fear, you have literally a dictator here who's trying to bring back all this stuff to our eastern borders. And we do need allies. Like the Baltics are very, very small countries, 7 million total. We're really worried about being invaded. And I would like to have the Americans on our side, even if they won't. We have the Finns and the Swedes joining. Again, another hilarious thing. Like if Putin was so triggered that he had to invade a sovereign country and take their land and kill their people and rape their women and children and deport 4 to 5 million people, calling them refugees, if they had to do that, why isn't Putin rolling tanks up into Finland and Sweden right now? Because they joined NATO because of the invasion. So everything is just laughable on his face. Gorbachev said in 2014, NATO, he said in 2014, it was never possible to even discuss Eastern expansion of NATO. And anyway, we all wanted to be a part of NATO. So maybe some conflicting messages there for some of the listeners, where you can see that I'm pretty hardcore about liberty and Bitcoin and keeping power away from the government. But in 2023, I honestly don't know what else to do when you got sovereign borders basically just being invaded. So that's my little food for thought there, I think.
No, I think over the years that we've been having these discussions, it's definitely brought in my perspective on all this. And I think you being in the Baltics and understanding the history of the region very well, like this is all muddy. War is muddy. It's dirty. It's not clean. It's not clear. I think your perspective is very valuable for the audience, whether or not it triggers some of the listeners. I think a lot are picking it up and expanding their perspective on this, just as I have, because it's muddy.
We would love your support. I mean, everybody here we have, whether you like the word liberal democracy or even constitutions, whatever. I mean, we have property rights. We have a good history before we were invaded by the Soviet Union of independent governments. So do all these other countries in the region. And it's unfortunately what you're seeing here is basically, if you ever wondered what it was like when the Russian Empire, the German Empire, the Austrian Empire were sort of carving up these states in the 1800s and stuff, this is what Russia just thinks that they can do now. They think that we all think that we're playing by one set of rules, and they just don't at all. So that's
It's crazy to think how quickly all this could happen too, because you mentioned like the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1990. It was a year before I was born. Like to me,
November 89.
89, 2 years before I was born. Like to me, historically, that's like eons ago in my mind, but it was right before I was born. Like it wasn't that long ago.
No, I was 7, and I remember going to protests and stuff, and I didn't know it at the time, but obviously later, especially when we become free, like the feeling of freedom. We talk about liberty and freedom and what's happening here. It was so strong for all of us, right, in these regions that were close to Germany, but like not in Russia. Russia, unfortunately, they could never get it. They could never, drunken Boris Yeltsin was the only time they had a democracy in the 90s. And the oligarchs and all this stuff. And then, to be honest about why that happened, it's not because of some inherent corruption or the way the people are. The reason that it happened is because Russia was the foundation of Marxist Leninist thought. 100 years before, they decided to form this, socialist empire and kill the czars and all that stuff, czar and the czarina and their family, and just start this like socialist, theoretical powerhouse. And it was just anything but. They killed at least 3 million Ukrainians, probably more in the 1930s. The Holodomor was a famine. Baltics just suffered horribly, deportations, everything during World War II, and they just haven't got out of it. But even they just never had it. They've never had any sort of a background. So we really do live through history when you see how just these things can happen, like you say, so quickly. And Putin does not have a 90% approval rating. Let me just tell you that. Be very skeptical when people tell you, okay, well, Ukraine is a corrupt country. Just be very skeptical who's telling you that. Ukraine has had free and independent elections every year. They've had 2 revolutions. I went to the Maidan revolution in 2014 and 2013. It was pretty wild. I have a lot of Ukrainian friends. They are very, very thoughtful people, and they're doing their best to break away from this influence. So I'll keep saying it, because this is not this conflict's not ending anytime soon. It's really, I think, really important for, I don't know, the northern hemisphere. Argentinians might not have too much to worry about as far as this goes, but
Yeah.
I was glad to see him support Zelensky as well, and support the Ukrainian people.
And I'm going to anchor too. I don't trust the CIA. They're meddling. It's like,
I told you on one of these shows, right? America should help all they can and then just stay the fuck out.
Yeah.
And just stay the fuck out. Do it. I think it's going to be hard. And I think all those cross currents that we just talked about, the Leviathan, it's going to make it hard. All I can say is we'll cross that bridge maybe when we get to it. But the war, we said never again with World War II, with all the shit that happened from the dictators of Stalin and Hitler. And we just said never again. And it's happening.
Here we are. Yeah.
One last thing. This shows you how they do it. Kaja Kallas, she's the head of Estonia, Prime Minister of Estonia. Her father was the head during the independence days, like during the 80s and the 90s of Estonia breaking away from the Soviet Union. Baltics were the first countries to break away, along with Azerbaijan. And she has told a story that, like, as her father framed what the Russians would always do. So again, the Russians, like, when I say Russians, I shouldn't say that, because again, as an anarcho-capitalist, I mean Moscow. I mean like the center. I don't mean like the regular people. But as the socialist communist elite, the way that they figured out their role in the West was basically to take and fuck shit up as much as you can, and try to get what you never had, and not really ask forgiveness, but then just go to the negotiating table, and then you'll be able to give some of it back. And I think that's a very normal, probably, game theory for a lot of states. It kind of goes back to some of this John Mersheimer realist, aggressive realist theory. But, they had nothing. Like, by the time East Germany is negotiating their reunification with Germany in 1989, they're completely falling apart. The Americans, Brits are giving them so much money in loans and like, economically, they were just crushed. They had nothing. Their system wasn't working. They were, a socialist, horrible communist economy, completely falling apart. So the only way, and they figured this out, like in the 60s, 70s, like the only way that they could really impose their will on the West is just to fuck with the West, whether it's like with espionage, with spying, which is something they've continued to this day. They poisoned, people, British citizens on British soil. They poisoned Navalny, the opposition leader, and all this stuff. That they just don't give a fuck about our rules, about our values, about our morals. And then it's not even really ask for forgiveness later. It's just do what you can to push the line. And then they're like, okay, well, you want us to stop? Let's negotiate. It's exactly what he's done in Ukraine. I mean, it's
Yeah.
sovereign land. He's gone in, killed a bunch of people, and Ukraine is trying to fight off now, suing for peace because they know that I can guarantee you this is just going to be a regrouping that they're going to do if they do sue for peace. They're going to try to take more. This is just the MO of this type of a regime. They just take what you can, take and take and take. And then if we say, look, it's too much, you're just breaking our rules. They're like, okay, we will negotiate with you. It's okay. And then they're going to get more than they had at the beginning. Because at the beginning they had nothing. They had, empty, corrupt fields and, dictators and vodka. That's all that they had. And now they have, they have Crimea and they have a whole eastern part of Ukraine. And don't tell me anything about Crimea being historically Russia or anything like that. Then they should give back Kaliningrad. Kaliningrad is right here. You can see it on the map. That's where their Baltic Sea fleet is headquartered. That's historically German for 1,000 years. They have Kaliningrad. Don't tell me that, history has anything to do with it. It's international law, it's borders, it's property rights, it's sovereignty. Anyway, I always get on this every time. I was going to try to just send a few messages, but I went on longer than I wanted. So
I love it.
It's my latest. That's my latest. I'll tell you more next quarter, I'm sure.
There'll be more to talk about.
There will be, my friend.
Another one in the books. I know you got to go.
I don't know.
I've got to go.
Daughter in the background, but yeah. I hope you have a joyous and wonderful Christmas, my friend.
Yes, and
your family as well.
Business on air here. But ping me in like 30 minutes or whenever you're done with your daughter, because I do want to tell you that thing I referenced before we hit record.
Fair enough. We'll do.
It's always a pleasure, sir.
Never a chore.
No. Peace and love, freaks. Okay.
Thank you, guys.